I wrote a little note here on page 239 when he says, but the serpent said there is no freedom for the world insofar as the circle of the world is not closed, because freedom is to be in oneself without interference from outside, especially from above, on the part of the Father. The world will always follow the will of the Father and not its own, insofar as there is an opening in the circle of the world.
Right. So it's the very first false worldview. That's the very first. It's the origination of the first false worldview, and it's a false view of freedom.
It's also really parallel to what Satan says to God in the book of Job.
Right.
He says, you've hedged him in, right?
Right.
And he has everything he needs. Let me take that away. Right. So in a sense, Satan's describing this open world, right, where God is gifting Job.
Yep.
And Satan wants to close it off.
Yeah.
Right. And then he says, let's see what happens when we do that, right, to Job.
And what is Job's reaction when he starts experiencing the closed world of the serpent? He wants to escape it, to die.
Well, he wants to never be born, which I think is different, but that's another conversation.
Okay. That's what.
He doesn't run towards the edge of a cliff. Like, he doesn't try to commit suicide. He doesn't talk about suicide.
Right.
He goes back to the past, actually. So he doesn't move towards the future, right? He's not a forward movement towards suicide. He reaches back to the past and realizes that to exist, this is my theory, okay? To exist is to suffer. So,
gotcha. So it echoes what Tomberg observes about Solomon's observation in Ecclesiastes, where he points like the reason this is in the Holy Scriptures is because Solomon is having a perfect realization of how totally futile the closed world of the serpent is. That's why it's Holy Scripture.
Yes.
And so Job doesn't yet see the possibility of resurrection, essentially.
But he does throughout the book.
Exactly. But at that point, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Right.
No, at that point.
Now I do. Yeah. No, that's an important difference, and you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I thought of Tomberg's previous statement where he said spiritual freedom is existence. And I wondered maybe if you guys could elaborate, because Satan is saying there is no freedom for the world, right?
Right, because it's for Satan, like freedom is entirely a negative freedom, right? Freedom of interference from above, to exist on your own terms.
Right. So
what's the anti-Satan here, though, in this passage?
In this passage?
Yes.
It's the woman.
Sophia.
Sophia.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, that's
right. It's Sophia.
This is how Tomberg.
It really is Sophia.
He builds in his Sophiology in subtle ways, in some places like this, and more obvious ways, like in the 19th letter, and the 11th letter. I mean, I think that's an incredible insight, and of course, in a way, what Tomberg does here with Satan is science is implicit in that project, right? Right? I mean, just think of modern science as completely closed off from the supernatural, completely closed up, or grace, or whatever you want to call it, right? And science in, say, 500 years will not look like it looks now. Because it won't be able to survive. And what's actually kind of cool is it's being destroyed over the last few years, so to the point where they have no credibility anymore. Yeah. Which I could open up to a new understanding of science, but it's going to take a while because people are still, the propaganda is still pretty strong.
Yeah.
But this is the Sophiological insight, and this is why when I wrote Transfiguration, the one chapter is Sophia and Ahriman, because that's the antidote to the toxicity of modernity.
So the open circle, I just want to mull this over to get it right in my own head. This closed circle is opened through conception, sorrow in conception and birth. Is that?
That's what he says in that parable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I just want to be sure that I have that understood that properly, because I don't want to I don't want to understand it the way I want to understand it. I want to understand it.
Let me just read what he says here, like right after what you just read. He says, the open circle or the spiral is the world before the fall of the 6 days of creation, crowned by the seventh day, the cosmic Sabbath, which corresponds to what one designates in mathematics as the step of the spiral. It suggests the idea of unlimited growth and advancement, being through its form only the introduction or antechamber to eternity. It promises unlimited progress. That would be like further, like epistasis, really, is what he's talking about there. The closed circle, in contrast, is in principle only a prison, whatever its extent may be. It is a wheel which turns on itself and therefore suggests no advancement beyond its circle. The idea that the closed circle or wheel suggests is that of eternal repetition. That's why there's no escape. That's why even death is not really an escape, which is why Job wishes to never have been born.
Yes, that's
because
really
if it's eternal repetition, he can endlessly, which is why Talmud talks about the Buddha, right? Escaping the wheel of reincarnation, right? Because death isn't actually, if you're still within the framework of the closed circle, death is not an escape.
No, it's not. It isn't. The insight that brings me is why God says to Satan, go ahead and trust the process, because he knows Job. Right. He knows Job already knows that.
Right.
And it's super important to know that.
Right.
Yeah.